Thank you for inviting me to Franklin, Tennessee, and to this beautiful venue at Liberty Hall. My name is Wenyuan, and I'm here to share my experience, strength, and hope in our common mission to take on critical race theory, an illiberal aberration from our core American principles. So what exactly is critical race theory? There is a long-winded, wonkish answer, which I will give you in just a minute, and there is a short answer. A while ago, when I was completing my doctoral work on the East Coast, I taught political science, international relations, and comparative politics at the collegiate level. Critical race theory was a tiny academic, critical race theory, or CRT, as an interdisciplinary sub-school of thought, was a tiny academic lesson for advanced college students and graduate students. CRT borrows from Marxism, the Frankfurt School of Neo-Marxism, radical feminism, critical theory, critical legal studies, postmodernism, and multiculturalism of the 1990s. According to prominent CRT scholar Roy Brooks, CRT is, and I quote, a collection of critical stances against the existing legal order from a race-based point of view, quote ends. Others, such as Richard Delgado and Jean Stefanchik, argue that, and I quote, critical race theory questions the very foundations of the liberal order, including equality theory, legal reasoning, enlightenment, rationalism, and neutral principles of constitutional law, quote ends. The CRT school consists of a collection of activists and scholars interested in studying and transforming the relationship among race, racism, and power. As an academic subject steeped in the presumption of systemic racism, CRT sees everyone and everything from a race-based perspective. In short, CRT is rooted in a hodgepodge of fringe theories to politics. It is a contested and explicitly political theory that examines all our social relations, economic governance, and policy outcome through the prism of race and prescribes, essentially, race-based and race-obsessed solutions to all social ills. However, instead of staying in its monkey cage as a strictly academic matter, as should be the case, CRT has increasingly become a monolithic ideological foundation for broader cultural and political trends, attempting to reshape and re-engineer our society. Nowadays, virtually every university, every school, every large corporation, every government agency, and every scientific society has pledged its unwavering support to the CRT doctrine. The US Department of Education, for example, recently proposed 2 founding priorities for the American history and civics education programs, citing Ibram X. Kendi and the New York Times 1619 Project as inspirational sources. The American Medical Association recently released an 86-page long report and a 3-year roadmap to dismantle, and I quote, structural and institutional racism, quote ends, through 5 equity-centered, anti-racist approaches. Our military has an overarching goal to become a model example of diversity, equality, and inclusion to tackle systemic racism. 3rd graders, remember, 3rd graders from an affluent minority community in Cupertino, California, were asked last year in a math class to deconstruct their racial and social identities based on power and privilege. A Philly elementary school earlier this year required that its 5th graders to partake in a celebration of Black communism, followed by a simulated Black Power rally to free Angela Davis. The Oregon Department of Education, as well as the California Department of Education, recently are promoting equitable math to dismantle white supremacy. The Arizona Department of Education suggests babies show first signs of racism at 3 months of age. And they even argue racial bias is more prevalent among white children. That's right, you should be alarmed by critical race theory, not in its academic nitty-gritty, but in its huge real-life implications for our education, society, and our way of life. The doctrine and movement inspired by CRT represents an existential threat to our indivisible nation. Ideas have consequences. Oftentimes, CRT-infused programs are masqueraded in pleasant-sounding yet ambiguous code names, including diversity, equity and inclusion training, anti-racism initiatives, racial sensitivity sessions, racial healing, social-emotional learning, critical self-awareness, anti-bias training, culturally responsive practices, critical ethnic studies, critical pedagogy, free radical therapy, free radical self-care, free radical collective care, action civics, etc. How can you tell a chair is a chair? Well, if you spot keywords such as white supremacy, systemic racism, white privilege, anti-racism, white fragility, intersectional identities, internalized racism, white social capital, colorism, interrupting racism, racialized identity, microaggressions, abolitionist teaching, spirit murdering, or land acknowledgement, then congratulations, you are in the CRT twilight zone, where all disparities are reduced to racism. All individuals are subjugated to a dichotomy of oppressor versus victim by the virtue of their skin color. There is no place for individual choice, initiative, or empowerment. The world imagined by CRT is a bleak, confrontational, and powerless one. There is also a level of corruption and dishonesty. Against their anti-capitalism beliefs, theoreticians and practitioners of CRT have swiftly utilized the free market to build a multi-billion-dollar industry. For example, Chula Vista Elementary School in California recently paid $65,000 for a keynote speech and a CRT workshop. An independent school district in Austin, Texas, paid its anti-racist DEI, their name, not mine, consultant, $172,000 to conduct a survey on race and racism. Racial literacy training, their words again, not mine, typically costs $1,700 an hour. It is fair to argue that CRT interest groups are benefiting financially from the very economic system they condemn. Many of such programs are taxpayer-funded. But if you fear you're powerless against this monstrosity, I beg you to think again. Just as CRT proponents and its snake oil salesmen have a multitude of trickeries to infuse the doctrine into our public life, we, the people, have an abundance of channels and strategies to push back. Remember, the counterinsurgency against CRT is a growing organic movement that is unifying Americans of vastly different racial, ethnic, and socioeconomic backgrounds. Your coalition here is a strong example. Our effort is a truly diverse enterprise, rallying Americans of different political persuasions. Don't allow the other side to smear us as a merely right-wing battlefront. It is not true. Fighting CRT is an intensely moral issue. Don't let them tell us otherwise. Please equip yourself with knowledge, rebuttals, and moral authority. Acknowledge what we are facing is an uphill battle against a political beast with 50 years in the making. But we are on the side of truth and morality. Talk to your friends, family, and neighbors, especially those who have different politics. Ask them these simple questions. Do you support traditional liberal values of equal opportunity, fairness, and justice? Do you support a free market and capitalism? Do you support true equality and despise race-based discrimination? Do you find issue with teaching our children that America is irredeemably racist and oppressive, that our founding principles are flawed? Do you believe in the power of the American dream and in personal empowerment? I believe most Americans, regardless of race, sex, color, ethnicity, or national origin, will agree with these high ideals of equality and liberty. While many of America's 14,000 public school districts are embracing CRT, 50% of all parents and 70% of school board members said they do not want schools to teach slavery as center of the national narrative. In addition, only 25% of parents and 17% of school board members believe that students should be taught that the founding ideals of our nation were wrong when they were written. You are not alone. Support your state and local lawmakers who legislate bills and resolutions to deter CRT in classrooms and other public spheres. State legislatures in New Hampshire, Texas, Arkansas, South Dakota, Oklahoma, Florida, Georgia, and your beautiful home state here have taken steps to ban divisive CRT training and prohibit political indoctrination. Support the enforcement of these new bills and resolutions by paying attention to what is in your child's curriculum and report any violations. Fiercely engage in local governance. Education is still by and large a local matter. Participate in local school board meetings. Write to teachers and school administrators. Join local PTAs. With every chance you get, champion our message of unity and demand equal treatment, transparency, and balanced school materials. If your local school boards, PTAs, or other authorities decide to pool our precious public resources to indoctrinate rather than educate, vote them out. Run for these positions yourself. Recently, in Southlake, Texas, a county that overwhelmingly voted Biden last year, 70% of the electorate voted for 4 anti-CRT candidates, including 2 school board positions, 2 city council seats, and mayor. We can replicate their success. You also need to know your constitutional right of equal protection under the laws and your legal rights to non-discrimination. If you or your child is subjected to CRT training, make a case of unlawful, illegal, and unconstitutional racial discrimination against those authorities perpetuating such training. You can file a civil rights complaint, you can challenge these practices in the court of law, and you can help mobilize and grow our opposition by exposing the other side's blatant corruption and corrosive activities. If you want to learn more about CRT and ways to push back, please, I invite you to visit my website, CFERfoundation.org, to request an informational booklet on CRT. At the end of the day, the American ideal that one should not be judged by race is a universal truth that transcends this political fad of critical race theory. Let's rally around what's right and act as one, because our common destiny as Americans is greater than our hyphenated identities. Don't divide us.